This is Julie, who's calling in from New Mexico. Julie, what did you want to talk to us about today?
I wanted to talk about how veganism can actually reduce overall violence in the world.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, just if people accept the violence against animals in order to eat them, and I just think that if we stop normalizing the killing of animals, then it would eventually lead to less violence within humans.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. First of all, as you know, I'm a vegan. I'm sympathetic to the vegan worldview, right? So I'm pro what you say in the sense that humans' tendencies towards animals, right? How they view animals can be reflective of how they view other people, right? Mahatma Gandhi talked about this concept, right? He was like, look, if you want to see if a nation is civilized, see how they treat their animals, right? I'm paraphrasing. He didn't exactly say it right that, but this was this same idea, right? It's this idea of look, we know that animals are quote unquote lesser beings than us in some way, right? Maybe they don't have the same rational capacities. Maybe they don't have the same intellectual or abilities otherwise. So how we treat them, how we treat the lesser of animals can be reflective of how we treat the lessers of people or what we consider lessers within human populations, right? Obviously the idea of seeing somebody and the idea of seeing somebody as a lesser is of course problematic within itself, but how many times has that happened in human history, right? How many times have people had this concept and has done terrible things? So in principle, I think you're right. Now that being said, I have met other vegans and seen other vegans who are just as violent in other ways. Maybe just verbally, maybe they're not killing animals, but you know what I mean. It can vary a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think I think the idea is nice. I think I like it in principle. Does it work in practice? I'm not sure, but yeah, I do agree though, right? I mean, as a whole, if the world was more vegan, ostensibly we would be a less violent world because animals would not be on the receiving end of violence, or at least it would be scaled down to a significant degree, right? They would still occur, obviously.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Just kind of reduce the thought of violence, even.
Sure. Yeah, and we do have very violent tendencies towards animals. Yeah. There are violent cultural tendencies. I do agree with that. Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I overall agree that reducing violence across the board is a good idea. I'm not sure how. I think it's a nice idea that if everyone became vegan, it would reduce violence between human to human violence. I'm not sure it works in practicality.
Yeah.
If you have a look at, I mean, the idea that Dan touched on from Mahatma Gandhi, who was a vegan, is and the kind of the thing that non-violence in that tradition is called ahimsa, and it's also held in Tibetan Buddhism. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, it could be argued that there is less violence than in the tradition that Mahatma Gandhi comes from. However, because of where they live and the practical aspects of that, a lot of Tibetan Buddhists do eat meat.
Yeah.
So it's, I think if we're taking kind of a case study look at it with people who follow the same kind of idea of ahimsa, of non-violence, and both come from traditions which are at least promote vegetarianism.
Yeah.
I don't think that bears out. With there is a lot of violence in some Hindu cultures where they practice veganism or vegetarianism.
This is a phenomenon you could. Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. I was just commenting. Yeah, this is a phenomenon. Ostensibly, you should be able to measure in some capacity, right? Are the most vegan societies the less violent? Can you track that in a metrics kind of way? Like I would think of, okay, well, there's no 100% vegan or vegetarian societies, but there's certainly more than others. I'm thinking maybe India, maybe other Southeastern Asian nations probably do that more. Are they more or less violent? It also depends on how you define violence as well. The only thing I know for certain that can level out structural violence is the alleviation of poverty, from my understanding. I'm not sure if veganism has that same effect. That would be interesting to study, though. Probably really hard to do. I don't know. But yeah, a lot of interesting thoughts here. Sorry, I interrupted you there, Richard. But
No, I think I
you know,
agree, and I agree with you
yeah,
entirely on the poverty front as well.
yeah,
I just think for me personally, I don't know if one's been done. I'll have to look into it.
yeah,
But I would love to see a study on ahimsa as a concept and the different cultures and places that practice it. Look at, you know, whether they are largely vegetarian or vegan, whether they are largely meat eaters, and
yeah,
look at corresponding kind of crime figures. I suppose is the only way you could do it.
yeah.
But
I don't
you
know.
know, it's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to collate that data and to decide where outside factors are coming in and where they're not. Certainly an interesting concept.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think it's definitely a watch this space idea. It's a very good idea, I
yeah.
think, to kind of look into that further.
Julie, any other thoughts?
Yeah. No, he made a really good point about data and stuff like that. I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking about the violence in general, just against people. So yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I again, I agree with you from a philosophical perspective, right, Julie? Which is like, yeah, I want to alleviate
course.
violence against animals, and right. So I think that if you're going to be vegan, you're going to be less violent, but like you may be less violent in that one category. It may mean that you struggle with violence in other ways. You know what I mean? Like I don't know.
Sure.
Also other
Well, I have
other vegans too.
thoughts.
Yeah, another thing to point out too,
Yeah.
Julie, is that I assume you're the same in my position, where you're a vegan for philosophical reasons. But not everybody who's vegan is vegan for philosophical reasons. Some of them are vegan because
Yeah,
for health reasons. Some of them are vegan for, other kinds of things, and so they may still have this kind of maybe problematic view towards animals or problematic view towards other people that doesn't get solved because
yeah.
that they're vegan. It's just because, oh, I'm vegan because I want to look fit and have this nutritional thing. Also, I think people of other races are inferior to me or something, right? Like that could still happen. There's nothing that says that that's not coherent or inconsistent, unfortunately. So yeah,
For
something to
sure.
think about there. But I like your call, Julie. It was a good call. Good call. Richard
Yeah.
or Julie, any other thoughts?
No, I agree. I think it was a good call. It was a great question, and certainly one. I think if this was a scientific paper, it would have a section at the end called discussion, where you kind of talk about how you can take it further and take the idea further and look at it into more detail.
Yeah.
Definitely a good call. Definitely an interesting subject to kind of that needs further development and looking at.
I like it. I like it. We do
Yeah,
have some other
like
calls.
the psychology of people, you know what I mean? Just their mindset.
Yeah.
But thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Julie. Have a great rest of your day. And now we have more calls in the queue that want to talk about veganism. So I knew, we started the firestorm here today, Richard. Yeah, it's happening.